Hi, everybody, and welcome to our ecology notes. I know we were supposed to take the bacteria and virus test today, but unfortunately, due to what's going on campus, we can't really do that until we get back to school. I know you're very sad, I am too. Instead, we're going to start our ecology notes. This is one of my favorite chapters. It's super interesting to figure out what the world around us is like, you know? What are the animals doing? What are the plants doing? How are they interacting with their environment? What's really interesting is prior to this, we were learning about evolution and natural selection. We're going to see how all of that is tied together, how natural selection, how evolution is tied into ecology. So, without further ado, let's begin. When we talk about ecology, we talk about the study of interactions between organisms and their environment. Ecology is another ology word, so this is another really kind of fun word that talks about the study of. And eco meaning world, right? Eco meaning system, world system. So in this, we study how organisms and their environment interact, right? This has to do a lot with natural selection because remember, when we talked about natural selection, we talked about how organisms will adapt in order to be better fit for their environment. We're going to see how the environment actually affects natural selection and why animals have to do that in the first place, right? So to begin, in order to begin our discussion about the ecosystem, we've got to talk about what organisms can be affected by. There are two factors that we talk about, biotic and abiotic factors. Okay, these are the things in the environment that will be affecting organisms. Let's talk first about biotic factors. A biotic factor is any living thing in an environment. Remember, bio means life. So if it's alive, it's a biotic factor, right? No matter how small it is, no matter how weird looking it is. If it is living, it is a biotic factor. Insects, plants, birds, predators, prey. That is a biotic factor. What's kind of neat is we know about something that is also a biotic factor that we're supposed to take a test about. Bacteria. Bacteria are alive, right? So they are a biotic factor. No matter how small it is, like I said, no matter how weird it is, if it is alive, it is a biotic factor. Okay, the next one is an abiotic factor. Remember, bio means life, and if we put that prefix of a in front of it, a means not. So an abiotic factor is something that is non-living. So things that are non-living in an environment that will affect an organism, we call an abiotic factor. Okay, it can be kind of tricky to think about this because we're like, well, if it's in an ecosystem, it's got to be alive. Not quite, right? Weather is not a living thing. Does not have any of the characteristics of life. Water is not a character. Water does not have a characteristic of life at all. There are living things inside water, right? Like plankton, like algae. We can call those biotic factor, but water itself, dihydrogen monoxide, H2O, not a living thing, so we call that an abiotic factor. And sunlight. Sunlight helps plants. They help them do photosynthesis, but still not living, no characteristics of life. Something nifty. Are viruses living or non-living? They are non-living, so they would fall into that abiotic factor category, right? And you also find viruses in your environment. So do you see how biology is all related? Kind of neat, right? So just a quick recap. Organisms are affected by either abiotic or biotic factors. When we talk about biotic factors, these are the living things that will affect an organism, right? These are the snakes and rabbits that affect an organism of cats. And an abiotic factor is something non-living, so like the rocks in the water that affects the life of a coyote. I don't know. These are just random things. I don't know how much rocks affect a coyote. But there you go. That's a non-living thing. It's affecting the coyote. Okay, so we are going to divide the chapter of ecology into a series of smaller lectures so that they're a little bit more palatable and so it's a little bit easier to digest. Like if we just threw this all on you, it would be a lot of vocab and it would just not be helpful. So we're going to start small. We're going to do some we're going to build some scaffolding so that we can figure out how to use this vocabulary, figure out how everything interacts, and then we're going to put it all together. So we're first going to talk about species interactions, right? In this specifically, we're going to talk about how two or more species interact with each other. We examine these interactions based on the helpfulness or the harmfulness of the process of that interaction, right? If we say, oh man, the species are being helped, they're helping each other, then we're going to classify it as something else if, compared to if they're harming each other or only one is harmed. All right, this isn't in the sense that we think of help or harm, like I lended a zebra some money. It's a different type of way of thinking, but we can get through it together. I know we can. Okay, so the first type of interaction we're going to talk about is competition. This is when two or more species compete for the same resources. Because these species are competing with each other, right, there might be a little bit of fighting, right? Both parties can get hurt. And because they can't exactly share that resources, they're each trying to get a large share of that resource, they're both not going to get as much as they could have, right? Lions and tigers don't get together and decide, hey, today you can have the gazelle, and tomorrow I'll have the gazelle. No, they don't do that. They just compete for it. And I don't know if lions and tigers share a habitat, so don't tell people that. I don't know. But, this is when species, they want the same resource, right? They're not just going to sit it out. They're not going to talk about it. They're just going to try and gain it. This is survival of the fittest. They've got to compete for it or else they won't get it. Because of that, they are harming each other. It's not intentional, but they're both not going to get access to the full amount of resource and they're hurting each other at the same time. So competition is harmful for both species. This is kind of like a lose-lose scenario if you're into HR. Predation. In this, you kind of see the word predator in it. One organism is feeding on the other organism. So this would be like an alligator eating a fish, if that's what they eat. The predator benefits, right? The alligator is like, ooh, yummy, yummy in my tummy, I've got a fish. But the fish is kind of like, oh man, I got eaten and now I'm dead, so it's harmed, right? One benefits, the other is harmed. Usually the predator benefits and the prey is harmed. That's why we call it predation. All right, hopefully those feel good right now, right? In competition, both species are harmed. In predation, one is harmed, one is helped. Now we're going to talk about symbiotic relationships. A symbiotic relationship, they fall into their own category because this is a relationship between two or more species. These species usually live together, and this is often required, meaning this relationship must happen for, the benefit, not necessarily benefit, but for we'll say, it has to happen so that both of them can live, both of them can survive. And this is a relationship that has, happened over the course of time. So maybe there was some natural selection favoring this symbiotic relationship. Let's begin with one type of symbiotic relationship called mutualism. Do you kind of see the word mutual in that? So mutual, meaning that both species benefit. There is a mutual benefit. This is when two or more species live together and help each other. So this is a really cute relationship, right? Because this is win-win. In mutualism, these species have evolved together. And because they've been together for so long, they are really buddy-buddy. They love to help each other. This is like bees and flowers. Bees love pollen and they use the pollen, to make honey. They use the nectar of flowers to make honey. This helps them. This also helps the flower because the flower can pollinate other flowers. It can spread its wild seed, right? This is a symbiotic relationship where they both benefit, right? Plant and pollinator relationships, they both benefit. All right? Ooh, so we see that that's two biotic factors, right? These are all talking about biotic factors. I totally forgot to mention that, but when we talk about species interactions, these are all biotic factors that are coming together to interact. Okay, so the next type of symbiosis we're going to talk about is commensalism. Commensalism is two or more species live together. One benefits and the other one's kind of like, not a big deal. It doesn't affect me, right? It doesn't matter what you do. I kind of don't care. I'm not affected. So this can kind of be weird to think of, right? One is benefiting, like why wouldn't the other one be harmed? Or, why wouldn't the other one benefit from it? Sometimes this happens just because, one of them just doesn't notice the other one. If you've ever seen a whale, do you know how sometimes they have barnacles living on them? Do you think that a whale that is huge, it's massive, do you think it notices one tiny barnacle? Not really, right? That means the whale is unaffected, but the barnacle is having a good time. It can move other places. It can find other places to eat, like other places to find food. It's living its best life. The whale, on the other hand, it doesn't care. Maybe it doesn't follow the barnacle back, right? It doesn't, it doesn't affect the whale. The only one that benefits is that barnacle, right? This is a good example of commensalism because that barnacle is benefiting. The whale has no clue it's there. Sometimes it's also a matter of, they are not competing for a resource. They're just kind of there. They use separate resources. So it doesn't matter what the barnacle is doing and it doesn't matter what the whale is doing. They don't have to compete. They don't eat each other. But they also don't hurt each other, right? We also see this with epiphytes. So if you have an orchid or a fern, they live on trees. The trees don't care, right? The orchids, they're having a good time. They have a place to live. It's safe. It's off the ground. They're not going to get trampled. But the tree, too big to care. All right. And we're going to move on to our last type of symbiosis, which is parasitism. You can kind of see the word parasite in this. And when we think parasite, we think ew. So one organism in this case is feeding on another, a host, without killing it. All right. This can be kind of weird to think about. If I'm a parasite, why wouldn't I kill the host, right? If I'm a parasite, it's more beneficial for me to not kill the host because then I have a continuous source of food. Like a good example that I can think of for humans is lice, right? Lice, they eat the flakes off our head. It's not going to kill you, it's just going to annoy you, right? Lice don't want to kill us because they benefit from eating like our skin off our head. But if they killed us, would we be able to produce food for them? Not really, right? This isn't working out well for the host. The host is kind of annoyed, the host is kind of upset, but the parasite, the organism feeding on the host is like, ha, I've got food, I've got an unlimited source of food, I'm having a good time. So because I'm having a good time, I'm not going to kill you, right? I'm not going to do anything to harm you so that I can continue having a buffet of scalp. I think that's what lice eat. So in this, right, we're seeing a type of symbiosis, a type of living together, like we talked about what a symbiotic relationship is. They live together, but one of them hates it and the other one's having a good time. So these are the types of relationships that we are going to investigate when we speak about ecology. And this is also going to be a good segue into energy flow. But we're not going to talk about that just yet. Just know that the next lecture is going to be energy flow. So, to summarize what we've talked about in this lecture, we've talked about what ecology is. We talked about how ecology is the study of species interacting with the environment. We've talked about two factors in the environment which affect an organism, abiotic and biotic factors. We've talked about the different types of species interactions. We have predation, we have competition, and we have three different types of symbiosis. All right, like I said earlier, next time we're going to talk about energy flow. Please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to let me know. Send me an email, leave a private chat. Also, be sure that you scan and upload your notes on Google Classroom so that I know that you watch this. And of course you would watch it because it's starring me, right? So I hope you all have a good day. Enjoy your day. and make good choices. Bye, everybody.